Please stand. Oh, yes, yes, yes. This Honorable Superior Court for the County of Wake is now convening and sitting for a special session. The Honorable Judge Brian Collins Jr., present presiding. Oh, yes, yes, yes. God save the state and this Honorable Court. Please be seated. Once again, just make sure your cell phones are on silent. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, members of the bar. Good afternoon, Madam Clerks. Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Deputy Donnelly and everyone else. I want to welcome all of you to this special session of the Wake County Superior Court. I'm Brian Collins. I'm a resident Superior Court judge, and it's my great honor and pleasure to preside over this ceremony at which we will celebrate and honor the memory of our lost colleagues and friends, and to the families of those of our honorees. Thank you for letting us do this. It's very important to us. We've been doing it for years and years and years, and it's a big event in our lives, and thank you for letting us share it. As to your family members, at this time, and I also want to invite you, even though this is court, it's really a celebration. So feel free to laugh, to cry, to take pictures, to move about as you please, and let's make this a heartwarming celebration. At this time, I'll turn it over to Lenore Hodge, the President-elect of the 10th Judicial District Bar.
I'm Leonore Bailey Hodge. I am the 10th Judicial District President-elect. I'm standing in today on behalf of our President, Jake Epstein, who's unable to be here due to another court obligation. I bring you greetings on behalf of the officers of the 10th Judicial District Bar and the more than 6,000 lawyers who are in our bar. Today's special session of court allows us to further, in a unique and very special way, the 10th Judicial District Bar's mission to advance the administration of justice and enhance the public's understanding of the role of lawyers and the rule of law. To the family and friends of those who will be remembered and celebrated today, thank you for sharing your loved ones with our profession today, as you have many times in the past. To my fellow members of the 10th Judicial District Bar, thank you for your attendance today. To Mary Winstead, Chair, and the members of the Memorials Committee, thank you for your continued dedication and service in support of this very special and unique program that we offer as a bar. Lastly, to Whitney Von Halm, our Executive Director, Nathaniel Adcock, Staff Liaison to the Memorials Committee, and the rest of the 10th Judicial District Bar staff, thank you for always ensuring that the goals and visions of our members are realized.
As chair of the Memorials Committee, I also want to welcome everyone to this special memorial session of court. The four distinguished lawyers we honor today have been remembered in other ways and at other services. But this memorial session of court is different because it allows our bar to celebrate the lives of our members with you, their families, their friends, and their colleagues. It is appropriate that we gather in this space to remember your family members and honor our former colleagues and pay them tribute. After all, your loved ones likely spend as much time with other attorneys and walking these halls in these courtrooms as with their families, and so it is fitting that we pay them tribute in this place in a special session of court. These memorial sessions always reveal so many interesting things about the remarkable lawyers of our local bar and the ways that they contributed to the profession and the community. I have often mused that attendance at these services should be required for law students and new lawyers, because inevitably we hear recounted ways the older lawyers of our bar embodied professionalism, perhaps in ways that have been lost with the passage of time. Hopefully, this time will be a welcomed opportunity for reflection and remembrance, as well as a time, as Judge Collins said, to share a laugh or two. We collectively pause today from the business of meting out justice in these courtrooms and all that comes with that to honor 4 attorneys who are no longer with us, but each of whom contributed to the pursuit of justice and left a legacy that we want to honor. Our first honoree is Kenneth Miles Johnson, and he will be remembered by Kenneth J. Gumbiner.
I'd like to thank the court, the bar, and the Memorial Committee, as well as the family, for inviting me here to honor my good friend and colleague, Ken Johnson. I practiced in Greensboro. That's where I first met him. He was a distinguished member of your legal community, the firm of Alston and Bird. My friend, and he was a former partner of mine in Greensboro. He left us on December 20th of last year at the young age of 65. I also like to thank Joe, his brother who's come from Indonesia, his sister, and his father, who's soon to turn 98 years old, I believe, who are here to honor him as well, and his son is here as well, Jacob. Ken grew up in the Raleigh area, graduated from Sanderson High School in 1977 and from UNC Greensboro, magna cum laude in 1981, majoring in history and political science at UNCG. He obtained his law degree from George Washington University with honors in 1984. In 1984, he began his career with O'Donoghue and O'Donoghue in Washington, D.C., representing multi-employer pension and welfare plans in all aspects of ERISA, Internal Revenue Code compliance, as well as benefits litigation, and litigation for collection of delinquent contributions and withdrawal liability. 1987, he joined the United Mine Workers of America Health and Retirement Funds, where he rose to the level of Associate General Counsel. It was with the UMW that he expanded his knowledge and experience in the area of employee law, employee benefits law, and became one of the leading attorneys in the country on the subject matter. While with the UMW, Ken fought tirelessly for mine workers' benefits. In 1995, he rejoined O'Donoghue in Washington, D.C. And while he was with the mine workers, Joe, his wife, shared a letter with me that she received from one of the young attorneys he worked with at the time, who was not licensed, but had just gone to work for the UMW. He had a court appearance scheduled before Judge Gerhard Gesell of Watergate fame. Ken brought himself up to speed quickly, as always, and filed an appearance in order to argue the pending motion. According to the Friends' note, Judge Gesell was not a fan of the motion because he thought the result that was requested was unfair, even though the legal basis was sound. As told by the former young lawyer, Judge Gesell spent most of his time questioning why he should rule in favor of the UMW in a less than mild voice and temperament. This now seasoned lawyer was so impressed with Ken's calm demeanor and knowledge of the law that, according to him, it shaped the rest of his career. He was not alone in his feelings about Ken Johnson. In May of 1999, Ken moved back to North Carolina and joined me at the firm of Tuggle, Duggins, and Meshin in Greensboro. Not unexpectedly, his prime area of practice was employee benefits, covering qualified plans, welfare plans, non-qualified plans, and ERISA plans, and probably another 10 things that I don't know anything about. In 2005, Ken was elected to serve as firm president and served in that role for 5 years, showing the respect that everybody in the firm had for him. His demeanor was always very thoughtful, but he had a great sense of humor. Although his primary focus was on benefits law and related litigation, I quickly came to realize that he was the person I wanted to talk to tactics about or strategy in my own areas of practice. It didn't matter whether we were talking patent litigation, complex business litigation, or the sale of goods under the UCC. Ken was always there to provide his own insights. He was a great listener, asked the right questions, and was great at making you focus on what the real issue was in your case. Often he might make a few comments and come back to me unbidden after he did his own research. He was always happy to review my briefs and provide helpful suggestions. So I didn't go to associates, I went to Ken. He was down the hall from me, and he was the one that I knew would give me some helpful suggestions and wasn't afraid to tell me if he thought I was wrong. Ken's listening ability carried over into lunchtime conversations when, with a wry smile, he would assume I had thought about something but wanted to comment just in case I might not have. The fact that he listened to everyone and had a keen interest in all areas of the law allowed him to synthesize insights into whatever issue you raised with him from his own practice. It's surprising how much it overlaps. I wasn't alone in my respect for Ken's knowledge and ability to triage issues. He was a humble man and didn't brag about anything. I only learned later from outside our firm that Ken Johnson was the go-to lawyer on any ERISA issue. So other lawyers in large firms would call him because they knew that he knew the answer. You couldn't go into his office without him studying some new area of the law, materials he had received. He was the most up-to-date person on his subject of the law, and somehow on my subject areas of the law that I've ever seen. If you were struggling with an issue, Ken Johnson was the guy you wanted to talk to. In 2015, Ken left Tuggle Duggins to become a senior vice president practice leader for the ERISA and Employee Benefit Compliance Department of McGriff Insurance Services. In that role, he traveled all over the country to meet with other employees of McGriff, train them, and share his deep knowledge of the law. In 2020, he returned to Raleigh, where Elmer, his father, who's with us today, still resides, and joined Alston & Bird, where he continued to focus on health and welfare plan compliance issues. In the early part of last year, in the midst of an arbitration I had here in Raleigh, Ken and I met for dinner on a weekend. The arbitration had started in 2023, and then in January it resumed. The arbitrator had COVID in the middle of our arbitration, so we adjourned, and after he recovered, we resumed. But Ken met with me for dinner here in Raleigh. He wanted to know what was going on. It was just like old times. I told him what was going on, what the facts were, what they were saying, and just listening to him, at some point you just have to nod and say, now I know exactly where I'm going from here. We talked about our families, and he patiently listened to my stories about the arbitration, gave me his reactions, and I left dinner that night missing our time together when he was in the office, and I could just walk down the hall, ask him a question, tell him about something, whether it was family, politics, or something I was working on, and he listened. He was very quiet about it. He would make comments and make his comments. We talked about how we needed to get together more often. Little did I know the time was running out for us at that point. When I left there, I thought, boy, I spent half the time in Florida, half the time in North Carolina. I was trying to figure out a way that we could stay in touch more. And I guess I didn't get around to it in time, but beyond his professional achievements, Ken was a man of deep personal interests and passions. He loved spending time with his family, especially at the beach in the high country. His enthusiasm for sports was evident in his avid following teams like the Washington Wizards, Carolina Panthers, the Tar Heels, the Vols, NASCAR driver William Bryan. He also enjoyed playing tennis with friends and established his daily routine of reading the newspaper and solving crossword puzzles. Ken and I played on tennis teams together for many years. We played tennis together too. You couldn't rattle him. He just was the guy that everybody wanted to go out and have a beer with after tennis. Ken's charitable spirit was exemplified through his support for various causes, including the Autism Society of North Carolina, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and the XS Project in Jakarta, Indonesia. Somehow I think it's related to Nathan being in Indonesia, but his generosity helped transform the lives of many, providing health, education, and other essential needs to marginalized children. Ken's legacy extends beyond his accomplishments as a lawyer. He was a man of compassion, dedication, and unwavering support for the community. He served on the board of directors for the Greensboro Cerebral Palsy Association and the board of visitors at UNCG, helping to advance the university's mission. His life's endeavors fostered long-lasting friendships, and his warm personality, keen intellect, and caring spirit left an indelible mark on all who knew him. As we remember Ken, let us celebrate his life and the invaluable contributions he made to our profession and our community. Ken's passing left a profound void in my heart, and I believe in many others. When I heard the news late last year, I was stunned. I know I don't look old, but I happen to be quite a bit older than Ken was, 13 years older. And to have somebody younger who you thought was always going to be there pass, you have to think about what time we could have spent together that we wasted. I sat there for some time before I could bring myself to confirm what somebody had emailed me. Only then I turned to my wife and shared the news that I think maybe Ken Johnson passed away. It's tough when something like that just comes out of the blue. And I thought to myself, what I really wanted to do was to call him and talk to him. Although Ken's time with us was tragically cut short, his legacy will continue to inspire me, and I hope all of us. I hope everyone here today will honor his abilities as a lawyer, his personal compassion for people, and his dedication to the community. Thank you.
Duncan Archibald McMillan will now be remembered by E. Gregory Stott.
Everybody knows my tie. Evan made this for me, and Duncan gave it to me. A while back, Evan asked me, he says, do you ever wear that tie? I told him, well, it's sort of hard to find the right occasion to wear a Budweiser tie. I can't think of a more appropriate occasion than a memorial service for the man who gave it to me and my friend, Duncan McMillan. Because Duncan was a man of ties. He was renowned for wearing ugly ties. I've always considered a point of great personal pride that I once bought him a tie so ugly he wouldn't even wear it. But I digress. Duncan A. McMillan, the people's lawyer. Duncan would represent anybody. I do not say that disparagingly. It didn't matter if you were a well-to-do client who came into his office and could pay the fee, if you were an indigent client who he was appointed to represent, or if you were just some poor soul that came into his office with a sad story, and Duncan would agree to represent you for nothing. He gave them all the same quality of representation. In fact, on occasion, he even agreed to represent me. I'm not going to talk about that, but I will say this. I have a clean driving record, and that is a monument to his legal abilities. But he had an interesting fee schedule, too. It was harking back to the days of old when lawyers would accept chickens and eggs and vegetables for their fee. Duncan accepted old junker cars. I'd see him riding around in a new old junker car, and I'd say, well, it looks like Duncan's collected another fee. But he did give quality representation. Years ago, my mother sat on one of his juries. And it was an indigent appointed case, and the jury found Duncan's client guilty. So I asked her about it. I said, what happened? And she told me, well, all the jurors really, really liked Duncan. And we really, really wanted to do something to help him out. But his client was so guilty. But that did not stop him from giving the same quality service that he did to every client. And his compassion did not stop with his legal practice. He had compassion for people everywhere. Years ago, he and I were at the Wake County Bar Association social function, and it was a light turnout. So there was a lot of food and stuff left over. So some of the more responsible members of the bar decided to call around to see if they could find an agency to take this extra leftover food and give it to the needy. Well, Duncan was moved by this spirit of giving, but he decided they were forgetting a large segment of society, needy society that needed to also be helped. So Duncan loaded up a big plastic bag of leftover beers, and we drove it to the labor pickup and gave it to the homeless people. So I mentioned the indigent appointed list. Duncan was on that. A lot of people think the indigent appointed list is nothing but a boondoggle that allows lawyers to make a lot of money off the taxpayer's expense. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. Those lawyers are underpaid and for the most part are underappreciated, especially by their clients who think they got a cut-rate lawyer. But yet he would still do this. Duncan was on the top level of the indigent appointed list. For those who are not familiar with it, it is a list, and lawyers are put on the tier based upon their experience and competence. Of course, Duncan was at the top tier of that appointed list, which meant he only got appointed to murder cases and serious felony offenses, which he took on, and they take a considerable amount of time, lawyers' time, to handle these type cases competently. One time I asked Duncan, I said, why do you stay on that list? You have a booming law practice, you got more clients than you know what to do with. Why do you continue to stay on the list? And he explained to me that many lawyers, for the reasons I've just mentioned, would not agree to be put on the top level tier because of the time it took to do that. So there weren't enough lawyers about on the third level list to represent these people who had been charged with these serious crimes. And Duncan felt it was his responsibility and obligation to stay on that list so they would also get the same kind of representation that every individual in this country is entitled to. And he would give them their best. And if you haven't ever tried a jury trial, you can't really appreciate what it takes out of you, both physically and mentally. But Duncan was prepared to endure that because he believed every individual had a right to be represented in a criminal proceeding, had a right to be represented by a competent lawyer who could assist them in their defense. And if need be, he should be entitled to exercise his constitutional right to have a jury trial, fair jury trial, by a juror of his peers. Duncan was prepared to do that and did that. Duncan practiced law not as a business, but as a service. The citizens and people of Wake County have lost a great, capable, and zealous advocate.
if I may, lawyers usually before they come up before the court say, "May it please the court." Mr. Stott, for perhaps the first time in your career, you have done that. I thought this was informal. My apologies. Please the court, won't have it again.
Since we're talking about ties, my husband Jeff is with me today, and he is wearing one of Duncan's ties. And there's some story about them being in the negotiating room years ago and them swapping ties. So you'll have to get that from him later. Robert Leroy McMillan Jr. will be presented by Judge Robert B. Rader.
May it please the court.
Yes, sir.
Equally important, may it please the clerk. Members of the jury, and what a jury it is. Fellow members of the bar, and ladies and gentlemen. How does one appropriately and adequately pay tribute to a person of the stature of Robert McMillan, particularly in the limited time allocated? Almost all of us here today knew Robert, and Duncan for that matter. And we all have memories or stories about Robert. And if we went around the room and shared those stories, even in daylight savings time, I think it would be well past dark by the time we finished. To say Robert McMillan was an icon in the bar would be an understatement. So I apologize in advance that I may take a few minutes longer than the time allotted. Robert Leroy McMillan Jr. was born on September 4th, 1923, at his home in Cameron Park, now Forest Park, where he resided for most of his life. Robert grew up under the watchful eye of his mother, Mary Lee Swan McMillan, and his father, Robert Leroy McMillan Sr., who was also a member of this bar and president of the Wake County Bar Association. He spent much of his early childhood playing in the woods of Cameron Park and roaming the neighborhood with his pet goat, Billy. And I'm not making that up. I've seen a picture of Robert and Billy. It's great. Some of Robert's most enjoyable experiences were spending time in Riverton, a small Scotland County community with long McMillan family roots. As a young boy, Robert spent summers in Riverton playing, swimming, and boating on the Lumber River. Robert's love for Riverton continued throughout his life, spending as much time as possible there with his extended family, leading sing-alongs and annually leading the 4th of July parade. Riverton remains a cherished retreat for the entire McMillan family. Robert graduated from Broughton High School, where he served as student body president. After graduating from Broughton, he began his studies at Wake Forest College, and Robert remained a loyal Wake Forest fan throughout his life. He also played on the undefeated freshman football team at Wake Forest. In 1942, his studies were interrupted when he was summoned by the Officer Procurement Program to a year of military and academic training at Duke. Robert was commissioned as an officer in the United States Marine Corps, and in 1943, he was activated and deployed to Guam with the 2nd Marine Division for the invasion of mainland Japan. Robert was one of the first to visit the devastation at Hiroshima. Robert returned from military service and graduated from UNC School of Law in 1949. He then began his private practice with his father, who Robert often said was the greatest man he ever knew. 1 year later, that practice was cut short when he was recalled to active duty for 2 years of additional military service in the Korean War. Robert was always proud, very proud of his military service, and he was truly one of the greatest generation. In fact, at his 100th birthday, I remember him getting up and leading the crowd in patriotic songs. It's frequently been said that beside every great man stands a great woman, and Robert was no exception. Virginia Maynard McMillan was the love of his life. They met while Robert was in law school at Carolina, and they were married in 1948, a marriage that would last 56 years. Virginia was a loving and selfless individual, and together she and Robert raised 6 wonderful children: Roy, Duncan, both of whom left us way too early, Doug, Rebecca May, and Lewis. They have 16 grandchildren and 14 great-grandchildren. Robert McMillan's illustrious career as a practicing attorney, it has been said, has spanned more than 50 years. He was actually licensed by the State Bar on August 5th of 1949. In 2023, in my role as chair of the State Bar Administrative Committee, I received a petition from Catherine Jean on behalf of Robert to be transferred to inactive status. Needless to say, it is extremely rare and probably unprecedented to receive such a petition from an attorney who is still licensed at the age of 100. That petition was obviously granted, and by my calculation, Robert McMillan was an actively licensed licensed attorney in North Carolina for 74 years. For those of you who don't realize, the milestone of 50 years in practice is what most of us aspire to, and that's what the State Bar recognizes with a special luncheon. 74 years is just unheard of. In the early years, Robert practiced law as an associate, as I said, with a firm of Douglas and McMillan, in which his father was a partner, along with Clyde Douglas Sr. Thereafter, Robert went out on his own and then served as a prosecutor for the Raleigh Municipal Court, the old Recorder's Court, from 1954 to 1957. Robert said he was paid $15 a day for his service. But back then, you were still allowed to practice in civil law and criminal law in other courts at the same time. He was in private practice for years with his brother Archie in the firm of McMillan and McMillan. The firm was located in the Raleigh Federal Building and later moved into the lawyer's building behind the courthouse above what was known as the old state soda shop. In 1985, Robert hired a young lawyer fresh out of the DA's office by the name of William Plyler as an associate. Shortly thereafter, the firm merged with Jim Kimsey, Steve Smith, and Duncan to form the firm McMillan, Kimsey, and Smith. In 1987, Catherine Jean joined the firm, and later Martha Walston, and some years later, Cameron Lee. When Jim Kimsey decided to move home to cooler climates in Brevard, the firm became McMillan, Smith, and Plyler. The firm was located, as most of you know, just across the street at 205 West Morgan. I used to tease Robert as he advanced in age that we built the Justice Center in the present location just so he wouldn't have to walk quite as far. Although I would add that walking was never a problem for Robert. He walked his entire life. Robert handled a variety of legal issues and cases over the year. As he said, I handled the cases that walked through the door. But early on, he began to focus almost exclusively in the area of criminal defense. And Robert was very proud to be a criminal defense lawyer. He represented defendants charged with everything from traffic infractions to homicides. He quickly developed a reputation as an outstanding trial lawyer. But more importantly, Robert demonstrated an unyielding commitment to fairness, civility, competence, and professionalism in the way he handled his cases, as well as the manner in which he interacted with others. Robert had an innate sense of justice and was eternally committed to the rule of law. While Robert represented individuals from all walks of life, he devoted much of his time, just like Duncan, to representing those who could not afford an attorney. Robert seemed to hold a special place in his heart for those who had not been as fortunate in life and did not have the means or ability to advocate for themselves. Robert seemed to be far more comfortable with a client in overalls than one in a Brooks Brothers suit. Robert always viewed pro bono work as both a moral and professional obligation. Robert believed that the practice of law and being a lawyer was a calling. He expounded on this notion in many CLEs, videos, and writings. To him, civility and professionalism were absolutely essential, and any compromise in integrity was completely unacceptable. During his many years of practice, Robert took very seriously what he considered his duty to give back to the profession and his community. He served as president of the Wake County Academy of Criminal Trial Lawyers, president of the 10th Judicial District Bar, and the Wake County Bar Association. He also served as a state bar counselor for 10 years and served on the committee for the relocation of the historic Badger Iredale Law Office to Mordecai Historic Park, where it remains today. Robert received numerous honors. He was named a member of the General Practice Hall of Fame by the North Carolina Bar Association. He received the John B. McMillan Distinguished Service Award from the NC State Bar, and in 2012 he was inducted into the Raleigh Hall of Fame. In 1991, the Wake County Bar Association created the Joseph Branch Professionalism Award, the highest honor bestowed annually to one attorney who exemplifies the quality of professionalism as set forth in our creed of professionalism. It was no surprise and only appropriate that the first such award was given to Robert. It could have easily been named the Robert McMillan Award. He would laugh when I would tell him that there was not a law-related award in North Carolina that a Smith or McMillan had not won. Robert also extremely active in his community, serving as a scoutmaster for a Boy Scout troop for many years, commander of American Legion Post, president of Raleigh Rotary Club. He was a member of the Raleigh Historic Sites Commission, and he was a lifelong member and truly active in his church, Pullen Memorial. Reverend Petty, good to see you. You did an incredible job at his service, by the way. While Wake County has been blessed over the years with many great lawyers, many in this room, and we just heard about two, few held the respect and admiration of their fellow attorneys quite like Robert McMillan. Robert was revered by all. Robert's name was synonymous with fairness, excellence, civility, and professionalism. He was like the wise old owl that we look to for guidance, as he set the standard for others to follow. Robert spent a tremendous amount of his time mentoring young members of the bar, for which we are all eternally grateful. His wisdom and years of experience earned him the titular title of Dean of the Criminal Bar. Robert truly loved the law, and he loved his fellow lawyers. From his legendary hiking trips on the Appalachian Trail in a necktie with Roger and Wade Smith, Ray Briggs, Steve Smith, Jim Kimsey, and sometimes Duncan, to the round table lunches at the old S&W cafeteria and Belk's cafeteria, to hosting the annual Wake County Academy of Criminal Trial Lawyers picnic at his home each year. Robert developed lifelong friendships with those who shared his profession. When Robert left us on July 10th of last year, my heart sank when I heard the news, and I couldn't help but imagine his arrival at the pearly gates. As St. Peter was there to greet him, so was an entourage of heavenly in-house counsel. George Anderson, Earl Purser, Carl Gaddy, Carl Churchill, Roger Smith, Tom Ferris, Wright Dixon, Charlie Blanchard, and the list goes on and on and on. I could almost hear Carl Gaddy in that booming voice that he had. Robert, where you been? We thought you'd never get here. And of course, anytime you saw Carl, Tom Ferris was close by, and he'd be saying, "Hold it down, Mr. Gaddy. You're going to get us kicked out of here." What a glorious day that must have been. Robert McMillan was one of the kindest, gentlest, most thoughtful human beings I've ever known. A true Southern gentleman with his consummate necktie and trademark fedora. Well, I could go on and on about his wonderful attributes. By far, one of his greatest was his sense of humor. Robert loved to laugh, and he loved a good story. His laugh was infectious, and at times he could hardly contain his own laughter to finish the punchline of a joke or story. He was a master at recounting humorous, if not side-splitting accounts from the courtroom. While his repertoire was endless, he certainly had his favorites, and I thought it only fitting to share one or two of those today. The first one that comes to mind was some years ago, Robert represented a bootlegger, and the bootlegger was charged with possession of tax-paid whiskey for purposes of resale. And it was certainly legal to possess tax-paid whiskey, provided it was not being resold. At the time, there was a presumption that if you possessed more than a gallon, it was for resale. The facts were such that law enforcement confiscated 88 pints of whiskey in an abandoned vehicle in a vacant lot, which happened to be adjacent to where his client lived in a mobile home. The car was abandoned and was not titled, but the last time it was titled in the name of his client. It was a strong case of circumstantial evidence. And when it went to trial and the state rested, Robert moved for non-suit on the grounds that there was no evidence of ownership or possession or control by his client. The judge granted the motion, and like any good criminal defense lawyer, Robert immediately told his client, "Come on, let's go," in an effort to get him out of the courtroom as quickly as possible. As they approached the rail, his client says, "What happened?" Robert said, "Come on." The judge threw out the charges, "You're not guilty." To which the client followed up with, "Can I get my whiskey back?" Needless to say, the whole courtroom erupted in laughter, including the judge. Another of Robert's favorite stories was A.B. Brees and the hog farm. A.B. Brees was a lawyer who practiced in Raleigh years ago and later in Fayetteville. And Mr. Brees operated a hog farm on some land that he rented from the city. One day, Mr. Brees had a case on the docket in the North Carolina Supreme Court. That morning, they called the case for hearing. Mr. Brees was not present. The court was somewhat frustrated, but moved to the next case, and then the next case, and the next case, and Mr. Brees was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, late in the morning, the door opens up to the courtroom, and Mr. Brees walks in. He's somewhat disheveled. He's got mud on his shoes and mud on his pants, and as Robert would say, cockleburrs and beggar's lice. The court stopped the proceedings. Justice Stacy looked at him and said, "Mr. Brees, why were you not here?" And Mr. Brees said, "Your Honor, I am terribly sorry. I got detained at my hog farm." Justice Stacy then said, "Mr. Brees, do you mean to tell this court that the business of your hog farm is more important than the business of this court?" To which A.B. Brees replied, "No, sir, but I do find the atmosphere more pleasant." Robert did a interview with his granddaughter, Carrie McMillan, one of our colleagues, which is on the Wake County Bar Association YouTube channel, and I highly recommend it. And when he got to the end of the interview, Robert said, "Too bad we don't have another hour." And I sort of feel the same way today. There's so many stories, so many memories, and so little time. But mercifully, I will proceed to the two most coveted words in any speech: in conclusion. So as we reflect today on the life of Robert McMillan, we should all be happy because Robert would want us to be happy. And we should be thankful that he was part of our lives and gave so much to his family and his community and his profession for 100 years. So let us all cherish those wonderful memories and keep them close in our hearts. And may Robert's life always be an example for all of us to follow. Thank you.
Our final honoree today is Harold Edward Russell Jr., and he will be remembered by James K. Edwards.
My name's Ken Edwards. I had the privilege of working with, working for, and then sharing office space with Harold Edward Russell Jr. for over 12 years. Harold Edward Russell Jr. passed away June 1st, 2024, a little over a year ago. In preparing for today, maybe like some of the others, I went online. And in this age of technology, a person can find out a whole lot about Harold Edward Russell Jr. I'll give 4 examples. Education: he graduated from Raleigh's Broughton High School. He attended undergraduate at UNC and got his degree, and then he went on to law school at Wake Forest. Career-wise, Harold Edward Russell Jr. worked for Cameron Brown Mortgage before beginning his law career, where he practiced predominantly in residential and commercial real estate. Family. The internet will tell you that Harold Edward Russell Jr. was survived by his wife, Helen Garrett Russell. That they had 3 sons: Ward, married to Molly; Van, married to Caroline; and Grayson, married to Corey. Combined, 9 grandchildren. Socially, the internet will tell you that Harold Edward Russell Jr. was a member of Carolina Country Club, Hound's Ear Club in Boone, the Old Raleigh Boys, the Stag Club, and he was a member and volunteer at Edenton Street United Methodist Church. You can find out a lot about Harold Edward Russell Jr. on the internet. But I'm not here to talk about Harold Edward Russell Jr. I'm here to tell you about Buzzy and the parts of his life that you cannot find on the internet. You see, Buzzy is Mr. Russell's nickname. Buzzy was never called by anyone Harold or Edward. And if he was, anyone around knew that that person didn't know him. In fact, they were probably a solicitor of some type. And you know, sometimes I think a nickname fits. Michael Air Jordan. The King, which, depending on where you're from and how old you are, could be Elvis, Richard Petty, or LeBron James. That was the way it was with Buzzy. It fit. It's easy to say, easy to relate to, it's fun, it's good-natured. That was Buzzy. So let's go back. We talked about 4 categories that we could find out who Harold Edward Russell Jr. was. But here are things that you need to know about those same categories that was about Buzzy. Education, well, Buzzy was a huge UNC fan. He somehow managed not to be offensive, but he maintained a strong confidence and expectation that UNC sports would be nationally competitive and, of course, would routinely beat the Wolfpack. Career-wise, working at Cameron Brown, that's where he developed so many friends like Jim Abbott, people who not only trusted him as a co-worker, but later when he hung out his shingle and began practicing commercial and residential real estate, trusted him to be their attorney. And I think that's probably, having worked at Cameron Brown Mortgage, what propelled him to practice in the area of residential commercial real estate. Family. Knowing that Buzzy was survived by Helen would not tell you that Helen also worked as our receptionist. Worked might be a little strong. You see, Helen had the ability to sort of set her own hours. And even those hours that were set were subject to immediate change if she got mad with Buzzy. Most often because he just wasn't taking care of himself. It would also not tell you how much Buzzy loved Helen, that he'd do anything for her. Internet won't tell you how proud he was of his sons. By my way of thinking, all three sons kind of followed in their father's footsteps. You have Ward. He founded and owns a well-respected and successful custom home building company. And Van, he followed his dad's business and investment interest as a financial advisor. But before that, Van performed title examinations for our firm. And that's where he strengthened his relationship with Caroline, his wife. Grayson jumped in with both feet and went to law school, graduated and came back and practiced law with Buzzy. And now he owns one of the most respected title insurance companies in our state. The internet won't tell you how proud he was of what his grandchildren did, how he spoke of them. In fact, you kind of know, or maybe you don't know what I'm about to say, but Buzzy's pride and love of his wife, his sons, his grandchildren, his entire family was expressed by his words and gestures when he spoke about them in a conversation between two men speaking alone. Socially, Buzzy being a member of the clubs doesn't tell you how much Buzzy loved golf. And he was good at it. The last time I played with Buzzy, he was over 65, not quite 70. He stepped up to the first tee. He was wearing a knee brace, a shoulder sleeve, and he smelled like menthol. But he stepped up to that tee, and just like he always did, he basically swung as hard as he could, and he knocked it right down the middle. He hated it when I outdrove him off the tee, which wasn't very often. The internet would also not tell you about Buzzy's quick wit, his infectious laugh, his laid-back nature, all of which made him a favorite at the 19th hole, too. Now, we're here because Buzzy was an attorney. Your Honor, take judicial notice that you need to know that Buzzy was a good lawyer. He did things the right way. He was fair. He represented big companies and individuals with equal determination. He worked hard, always arriving at the office before 8, and most days before 7. He was respected by the attorneys he worked with, and he was renowned for his real estate knowledge. He was a good businessman. He was a good boss. His staff loved him, as evidenced by Rhonda Mannion, his longtime paralegal, being here today in support. About 2 months, or a few months before Buzzy's death, Grayson called me, and he set up a lunch between the three of us. We laughed and we joked about the old days. Afterwards, Buzzy agreed to come back to my firm. He sat in our reception area while the staff that knew him came and greeted him. The ones who didn't know him came out to meet him. I'm not sure why. I had never really thought about it. I certainly hadn't planned it, but as one of our young associates approached, I said, "This is Buzzy. He's my mentor." And I guess that's how it would be with a Buzzy. A Buzzy just lives life. He does right by all. He shows direction by action, not words. A Buzzy loves family. And through all those actions, they surely do mentor us all. Harold Edward Russell Jr. Buzzy. It fits.
This concludes our program. I hope you have found it as uplifting and inspirational as I did. We had Life's Cut Too Short and one really long one, and it just makes you want to hug your loved ones and go out there and do good in the world. I want to thank our esteemed judge, Judge Collins, who presides routinely over these sessions. Great to have you back.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
Our clerks, bailiffs, wouldn't be a session of court without them. The staff of the Bar Association, Executive Director Whitney Von Ham, our staff liaison Nathaniel Adcock, and Lenore Hodge for opening our program today. Thanks to all of you. We want to thank you for the families for sharing your loved ones with us and allowing us to honor them at this special session of court. As you can see, it was videotaped, and after it is edited, it'll be on the Wake County Bar Association YouTube channel for prosperity. So feel free to tune in maybe in about a month, and you can watch this all over again. So thank you all very much.
Before we go, the biggest thanks of all goes to Mary Winstead, our fearless leader, who's been the chair of this committee a long time. She does a lot of work, and it's a lot of work to put this session of court together. So thank you for your hard work. I also want to tell each of you that this courtroom is open for the rest of the day. I want to invite you to stick around, visit with each other. I don't get to see many of you ever, and I'd like to see you, and I hope you'll all see each other. And with that, Mr. Sheriff, please adjourn this special ceremonial session of the Wake County Superior Court. Signing out.
Yes, Your Honor. All rise, please stand. Oh, yes, yes, yes. This Honorable Superior Court is now adjourned. Sign it on. God save the state and this honorable court. Safe travels and sorry for your loss. Thank you.
Thank you very much.